Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. Coming to you a day earlier than I usually do. So happy Saturday, and joined by Foyet once again. Foyet, it has been awesome being able to chat with you last weekend, and then we had a nice, I guess, private chat earlier this week, just talking through some other Sploneland stuff. But welcome back to the show. There's some really interesting stuff that I think we want to dig into that we've been talking about privately, and I want to get your thoughts out here and for the rest of the community. But first of all, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, and thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So I don't know where you want to dive in first. There were a couple of topics that we had, one of which is timely given the FTX situation. We want to take a look at what Splinterlands can do to show quote unquote like proof of reserves, or where the company or DAO stand and what the procedures for the DAO would be moving forward in a catastrophic kind of situation. And then you wanted to talk about SPS. So I figured maybe we could do a 1-2 punch going with in that order, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. I think with regards to the overall FTX, we don't know the exact fallout. I think there's definitely fallouts from this with other.
Still more contagion, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll let the SEC kind of unravel the whole process and see where it goes. I just hope that the end result is positive for the community, and I think the crypto community will be more aware and will apply many of the Web 2 thought process and economic kind of like modern portfolio management theory, audits, proof of reserve, those types of concepts before we put money into these exchanges as they pop up, and we continue to look at that. And I think in terms of where Splinterlands is, I don't think necessarily that Splinterland, in terms of us as a player, we need to really consider Splinterlands looking down the path of achieving some kind of proof of reserve, looking at like a Merkle tree or dumping those funds and conducting those audits. But I think what's important and what's imperative for the player and the community, I think, are two aspects. I think Splinterlands, the company, need to either provide some kind of letter or agreed upon procedure by their accounting firm, or a audit. I think agreed upon procedure is probably easier, or even some kind of audit from the independent letter, some form of attestations for their financial state. I think the health, and I think the second piece is the business continuity component of it. I think Splinterlands, the company, I think players and communities should encourage them to kind of articulate a little bit better their path forward in terms of business continuity. What happens with the assets on AWS, and what are their strategies, and what happens if the kind of the world burns down, and what's the process. And it could just be where certain aspects. And it's just depending on their thoughts and views, but it would be nice to kind of hear from their side of the story, and just allow them to kind of extrapolate and expound upon that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, because what's interesting, a lot of the sentiment around the proposals is, or has been, not all, but some of the sentiment has been, if they're proposing this and they need to get DEC back to peg, and they're kind of doing it with reckless abandon, is the company in trouble? Are they going to tell us, right? Maybe if they told us, then we would be more accepting and understanding of the proposals the way that they're given, to which I fully disagree. If the company says that they're in trouble, I think people would be exiting the project to de-risk, rather than like trying to support.
Right.
But I think the Luna situation, Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, like this cascading effect that's happened since maybe March or so this year, and may continue to happen, right? Obviously, culminating with well, I shouldn't say culminating, but most recently with FTX and Alameda. I think it just goes to show, the narrative around a lot of these companies a year ago was completely different, and there was no belief that they could fail. But we're seeing the unregulated space fail because there's nobody here to bail them out. And so obviously Splinterlands is a much smaller project, and I do believe that Splinterlands actually offers a lot more transparency in what they're doing. But I agree with you, and we're seeing this now with Binance leading the charge in terms of like showing proof of reserves to make sure that there's no run on the bank at Binance, and a lot of other exchanges are following suit. But there's people here with significant capital and a significant amount of assets and dollar value within Splinterlands. And I would say that if Splinterlands were to join that initiative to kind of show where things are at from a business perspective, that would not only calm down the community or put them at ease, but might attract more attention as well for being, they're known for the transparency. So showing that might bring in more a different audience that's looking for these projects that are higher profile or with high profile partnerships, things like that.
Yeah, I definitely think communication needs to improve in certain areas. For instance, tournaments, the RNG aspect of it, the ability to have an
Mm-hmm.
audit and enumerate and be able to say, okay, these rule sets, these types, this is what it's supposed to do, and is actually doing it. I think any legitimate sponsor, they'll just throw some money into the tournament aspect of it, but they're not going to throw a ton of money without this kind of. So the world of audit and the international side, the American Institute of Certified Public Accounting, the AICPA, has a product. They call it SOC 2. It's a service organization control. It's an audit. It's a review, and it has a different governance structure, and then covers different areas like security, privacy, processing integrity, and availability, confidentiality. It covers different types of criteria that goes into that. And I think it's good for Splinterlands as a company to go through it. I know Axie did it for at one point, and I don't know if they renewed it. And then the aspect of let's say even the Ronin bridge, and I think bridges are a very good candidate use case for these type of independent reports, like the service organization controlled report. It covers, and it can be conducted over every either 6, 9, or 12-month period and things like that, just depending on what's in need of it. But I think it goes to prove that the node, for instance, and this is why I think it's important for the company to have a clear path or a clear way to articulate why it's necessary for a DEC to hover around the peg value as an algorithmic stablecoin, because it'll fluctuate, and then so you get to the aspect where you burn the SPS for I believe a minimum 0.975 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then what happens when the price of SPS goes way above, and then it gets into the valuation of SPS. I think as someone that has been delegated, I think Yabaman and Pluck, they've been put in charge of the DAO, the SPS DAO component, the treasury management aspect of it. And I think one of the things, as the DAO acquires more DEC, if they were going to do more of a lot of the sale and DEC, they'll have to make a decision what to do with that DEC, because and then how to return get a return on capital for these. Otherwise, the money in the treasury just sits there and doesn't earn anything. And while the entire player base community in the company, we stake them, we get them everywhere, and things like that. So there's definitely a conversation that needs to have on these things at a larger framework. But I don't know what their strategy is, what their timeline is, and even as something as simple as like the Rooney conversation, right? The response, the write up on Rooney. Yeah, there's a couple of bullets that they talk about in terms of the use case for land badges.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that players are now kind of need to consider is what happens when a guild gets to tier 5. Like, there's only so many of those at the top. So how do players, average players, or slightly above average player, get to participate and earn higher SPS rewards from these guilds? Is one of the ways is they buy up these Roonies, and these Roonies will be staked at these guilds. So I'm really surprised, like the number, and this is like when you look at the number of buyers, it's mostly Splinterlands employees and the company itself, but they recognize the value for the guild itself. I mean, we can look at the land, and we can look at the badge use case long term and things like that. And at the end of the day, when you look at the amount of guilds that have to stake these, 6,500 is actually not enough.
Actually, that's a good point. Well, and
Yeah.
we're not even anywhere close to 6,500 at this point.
Oh yeah,
With
we probably won't ever sell. We
yeah,
probably won't sell out because I I don't think guild leaders at the ones that are projected to hit the top five, tier 5 level. I don't think they think about how many runeys they need as a guild to stake to be competitive against the next guild. So there's a lot of things, you know.
yeah. There. Well, I mean, you bring up a good point here because obviously I don't know how many guilds there are total, but the amount of guilds that are, I think, competing in tier 4 right now is like 6 or eligible to compete in tier 4.
Correct.
So it's still a very small amount. But when they talk about staking in guilds, it sounds as though that's not then available to be used in game or for anything else. So 6,500 or whatever the mint number ends up being seems like it will go down significantly. And if they continue to add utility to it, that's how they'll raise the floor value on Rooney moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, to simplify it, okay, let's say there's only going to be maybe 3 tier 5 guilds, right?
Mhm.
Let's say 3 tier 5 guilds for a significant period of time. Then how do those top 3 differentiate themselves in terms of if, and Matt hasn't articulated the use case for staking on these guilds for these Roonies. Let's just say he throws out an arbitrary number. I mean, if one of the 3 have significantly more runes than the other, they automatically start at a higher base value in terms of their SPS rewards or whatever it is the guild's going to achieve.
Well, yeah, we don't know what benefits will be there, but or what specifically will be there, but the fact that they're thinking this stuff through is definitely. I don't know what the time frame is, but one thing that I didn't, I think I might have said this in the town or the 5 big takeaways, but it seemed as though one of the biggest bottlenecks was tech modernization, and that for the most part has been implemented, and the team is kind of celebrating this internally, as I've seen. So this is hopefully going to be a period in which the next 6 months brings us a lot more of what we've been promised and have been asking for.
Yeah, and then I think the next step is the non-card market, and we'll see it rolled out. So I think we're pretty long ways in terms of Rooney being introduced into the game, because earliest it would be as playable would be the end of this year, probably Q1 next year most likely, and then and then the use case and the rollout. I mean, we're talking about maybe like probably it'll be like land or potentially close to what land is in terms of timeline. So we're looking at 2+ years out before a lot of these things get rolled out.
You think so? Even with all the value that they're trying to drive to Rooney, I feel like that stuff has to come next year.
I think being playable, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, if they're gonna put land out phase 2 in 6 months or in the second half of next year, I would hope that if Rooney's out by then, that they could have some kind of value for it or utility for it on land when that goes live.
Yeah, we'll see the scratch off on land phase 1 first when we figure out what we get on the lottery tickets for the landholders.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, let's take a quick moment here. I'm just gonna rip through the comments, say hello to folks. Dragon's here. Dragon was first. Andrew's in the house. Yuki, hello. Gathering the Magic. Harris, Tushu. Thanks for hanging out on a Saturday morning / Saturday evening. Dennis, what's going on? Welcome, Foyet. He's saying. Harris is saying that the GLX APR is crazy. I pulled out my LP and bought GLX for staking. I'm gambling on this project. Okay, you guys talked a lot about GLX. I don't know if you want to dig into any GLX stuff, Foyet, or if you're paying attention to it.
Good gamble early on, as we've proven historically, even from the SPS. I think you just have to have a tolerance for some volatility.
So I haven't said this anywhere, but I'll let you guys know for full transparency. I am selling half of whatever GLX I get. I'm staking and airdrop. I'm selling half of it and putting the rest back in because, as I said, that's what I want for ice cream money. I think I said originally I was going to sell like 1/4, but it's too hot right now. And the fact that like Harris, you're aping into this, I don't know. That just tells me that everybody aping in is a good time to take some.
Yeah, it's a supply. There's not enough supply right now.
Yeah,
so you're gonna get good return, good APR.
Yeah. Right. I mean, to me, selling it for even if it's just if I sell one right now for 20 cents, I think I sold some for 20 cents this morning. I don't doubt that there's going to be a slow period, a lull period between now and whenever the game comes out, that we drop down to maybe 2 cents, which is what the lull period was before the staking went live. So if it drops down, then I'll pick up 10x whatever I was able to, sell for, or I'll pick up 10x what I sold for. Yeah, people are aping in. All right, so did a video on GLX to help everyone claim and find their tokens. Thanks, Gathering the Magic. Icy Flow is here. All right, you guys are all talking to each other. Thinking about selling my GLX. Not a bad idea. Reggie Middleton has the patent on DeFi. I don't know what that means, Stock Jockey, but it's good to see you. All right, let's get through this. You guys were figuring out ways to safely store your capital. And you said Chaos Packs is the way to go if you want to safely store your capital. Well, I think what we're talking about here, this is more catastrophe planning, right? Like, if it's just good to know what the company's going to do if things absolutely nuke. And I guess if we could take a minute to step back, now that you've seen, or now that we've had a couple of days to digest this whole FTX drama, Alameda, Binance drama, that combined with like macro, how are you feeling? We already said we probably expect a little bit more contagion for this to impact, but are you seeing this as like, we're just going to continue to hit lower lows for the next couple of weeks, months? That combined with the fact that inflation was a little bit lower. It's been a crazy week, right? Inflation was a little bit lower. So is there going to be a pivot soon from the Fed? Are they going to wait until something breaks? I'm curious to get your very broad outlook as to, what you're maybe expecting over the next 6 months.
I think the market, in terms of known quantities and variables, the market itself tend to price maybe 6 months out or so. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of things have already been factored in, worst case scenario from the FTX fallout and things like that. I think in the absence of another black swan event, or maybe potentially the Federal Reserve continuing to raise interest rates another 75 basis points, or I think if they look at it, and depending on what happens with the election cycle and what happens with the U.S., I'm just referring to the U.S. piece here, and what happens with the Senate and the Congress and things like that, and positioning. So there's possibility, and I hope that will kind of hit a bottom and hit capitulation soon, and then hopefully kind of the Federal Reserve will pivot. I think that's the best case scenario people are hoping for, outside of another black swan event.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the sentiment that I read is things are breaking in crypto right now because crypto is the most high risk of the, sure, or at least one of the highest risk of the asset classes. But eventually this will dip its toes into traditional finance or real estate or bonds or something, and we might see something break there.
Yeah, and I think a large piece of that has been factored in already in terms of the pricing. I mean, look at Amazon as a company. They became the first company to lose $1 trillion and things like that, Gosh, yeah. So it's a large, I think a large piece of the supply and the variable has already factored into to the economy. And I think there's really no one knows when to actually buy in. But I think it's it's safe to consider each tranche or a large dip to consider buying a little bit more. It's kind of like one of people who do like arbitrage play, and they have money kind of floating around our crypto, and depending on where it is, like DEC is like for me is a relatively I don't know, safe, I say quote, but in terms of like, so when you look at DEC dropping below, 0.8, right, let's say for every 1,000 DEC, if it drops around that or below, then it might be a good, because eventually, Yamaman and the company, they're going to be forced to buy more and more DEC to kind of bring it to peg, because I think this is where I think a lot of node holders, they're not realizing that every time, and SPS should never been used or allowed to be used in this case scenario to buy nodes and
Really?
transact.
Okay. I mean, I'm a node holder, so
Yeah,
please
it's a
tell me
terrible.
all the FUD on nodes so I can
Yeah,
rethink my
it's a
position.
terrible use case for SPS because SPS isn't stable, right? It's like
Hmm.
you buy something, you want its stability, and you want to arbitrage something to
Yeah.
that's not stable. So you want to use things that you can arbitrage, and but without having. It's like in the days of like Alexander Hamilton when he's like a young kid and working these shipyards, he has to arbitrage all these various currencies that with goods that come in, and he has to
Yeah.
debate with these guys and figure out how to make profit. And you pretty much have to have a high IQ to or someone with heavy computer or some kind of computational, you have to be on it to be able to make money in that
Hmm.
situation. So for someone to kind of speculate on SPS to use it to buy like notes and Riftwatcher and things like that, it's just not sound money, and I don't think it's like sound business transaction. But that's just my opinion and perspective.
So I guess what I'm wondering then is you're obviously for the pricing of nodes and DEC then,
Yeah, I mean,
or
I
at least
always, yeah, I always view that everything should be transacted in DC,
in
and
DC.
that vouchers should be coupons, and
Okay.
yeah.
Vouchers should be coupons. Yeah, well, they're pretty decent coupon right now if you want to get it.
Yeah, it's
Didn't think so.
so I think DC is a great arbitrage play, and then vouchers are great arbitrage plays, assuming that you're a player and you
Hmm.
want the goods and the assets that the company will list eventually. I think the only challenge with vouchers is that there's too many being printed. So I think the company should decrease that or put out a proposal.
To decrease it. Yeah, I mean that'll be interesting because the community is going to react very emotionally to
Yeah,
that
I mean the price will
once that
go
when
up
it
a little
happens.
bit.
Yeah.
It'll
Well,
they,
that'll be the main argument, right? If they cut it in half, then the price of vouchers should jump up
yeah.
double.
Yep. There's going to be enough players in our community that will say, okay, I like products like I like uh, products. Let's just say like the Lux Vega, right? Or
Hmm.
I like different things that the company will allow me to use these vouchers, these coupons that I can cash in for various. I'm not going to cash in every single one of them because that's just everyone's taste preference, their playing style, and their strategy is different. But
Hmm.
in some sense, you stake your SPS, you get this, and it's just a nice reward for the by the company for these players who believe in them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. The thing with node licenses and the proposal for that was they switched. They weren't just switching or swapping out DEC for SPS. They were swapping out the fundamental pricing structure,
Sure.
right? Because right now it's not like an X amount of SPS. It's the X amount of dollars priced in the market value of SPS.
Yep.
And if they had done that for DEC and said, okay, it's X amount of dollars, so I think 2,500 right now at the market value of DEC, we would have actually burned more DEC, and
Oh, sure.
I actually probably would have been okay with that because that's not changing the pricing structure. But
Right, but it would change the use case of the EEC.
true, true. It wouldn't solve the demand issue, right? Because what they're trying to do is get DEC back up to peg
Correct.
by creating these fantastic discounts due to DEC being overly inflated right now.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
There's not going to be enough drivers and guilds
Hmm.
and lands, and the company can say that there's just too many DEC out there. They're just going to have to decrease the faucet, and they're just going to have to encourage everyone to move forward. But I think it comes down to the security of the L2, right? The node.
Hmm.
We need a ton of node to secure it. That's that's the reality.
Okay, so we had this conversation privately, and I don't know
Yeah.
how far you want to dig into it, but where you're saying that one of the reasons that nodes are not really deployable right now, outside of the fact that they're still coding and working on it, is the fact that there's not enough out there, right? 5,000 licenses. Granted, you can run one on your own, but there's no incentive unless you're like the top 20. So we can't or shouldn't really count those. So what was I know you told me already, but what was the target that you think that we should be aiming for, or that the team should be aiming for, in order to properly or appropriately decentralize where the node quantity needs to be at?
I think probably minimum is to sell out the current tranche. It's
Okay, so to
probably
get to like 10,000.
yeah, I think that there has to be, you're dealing with a distributed network. And then the other question is, okay, they can hedge it by putting less load on these nodes, these applications to secure it. But then what is it doing? Again, they're just giving you free SPS and vouchers, which is great. I mean, you guys stick to risk, and that's part of it, the benefit, right? The early adapters, you do nothing, you get freebies.
Hmm.
And then, at the same time, if the company changes its view on certain things, then you kind of get mad at it because you kind of lost. But for the time being, you incur no utility, no energy, nothing, and you just get these freebies. And then the question is, you might get these freebies until what, July, June, August?
Yeah.
It's a long time, but you might get it for a year, maybe 18 months before it can be secured on L2. And then,
Hmm.
what's really the purpose of the bridge? I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at their application and how they're compiling and, the source code. And
You talking about the L2 bridge? So from the
yeah,
validators back into the game.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, what do you mean by what's the
I don't know
purpose?
what even their MVP, their minimum viable product that they're going to go to the market to be able to release it. I mean, you can secure a node with a small amount, but then when you let it out in the wild, like how many nodes you need it to be decentralized at a minimum level, and then within every tranche that you get to, the node becomes more secure as it becomes more decentralized.
Yeah.
It's the great thing with distributed network, right? And then the other piece is, with the distributed network, you can only put so much load on it, from a load balancing standpoint.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it has to go to the mothership, which is AWS, I believe they're using. So then it's
Hmm.
like relying on the AWS global network still,
Yeah.
And
Well,
this is where the business continuity comes in.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's circling back or full circle. One of the other things that you mentioned when we were talking is a lot of there's going to be a lot of centralization that ends up happening because how many services are there out there that would be offering this kind of product or offering this kind of service, right, to essentially host your node that most people will end up going to, right? Most node license holders like myself, I don't know that I want to run one, but I'll
correct.
probably just delegate it to whoever it is, and that
Yep.
might be a race to the bottom or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's a race to the bottom because whoever's offering the best fees or the lowest fees, that's where everybody's going to go, and then that's not really decentralized ultimately.
Yeah, I think there was a map chance he was offering to
Chance,
do it for
yeah,
free.
for
Yeah,
free.
so he's offering to do it for free, which is nice. I don't know how many he can do and what his nodes and his economic energy costs and things like that.
Hmm.
So that's a good deal. So it starts there, and then someone will want to take 5%, 10%. There's going to be
Yeah,
numbers, and then the question is, are they going to be able to provide a maximum extractable value for it? Are they going to run 24/7? Are there going to be downtime? And in the event of server downtime, how are they switching your node? I don't know how the tokenization of that node ID to avoid things like
yeah,
slashing, duplicate. So I don't know. These are all things that I think Matt and the team will have to kind of vet and play with.
yeah. Well, that there's no way that this is coming this year. I think they've already said, mainnet wouldn't go live until next year,
It's
even though
it's
Q4
tough.
was the initial. Yeah, yeah. Well, because
Yeah,
there's a lot to think about there, and then I would assume that they would want to get this information out there well ahead of time. So any of these services that are planning to offer, or any of these companies that are planning to offer services, would have the proper infrastructure set up by the time that this actually goes live.
yeah, and are they creating a tier structure where there's going to be a core main people, like there's going to be validators that we're going to vote as a community to
Yeah,
give these? Are
but
those
that's
going to?
separate from the licenses. But yeah,
Yep. Yeah. So are those going to be carrying a heavier burden than the rest? Because one is
mm,
they're getting it for free; they don't have to buy it.
yeah,
There has to be give and take, right?
yeah. True, true, true.
Yeah. So I don't know what the expectation is, and then it's a security, right? You have people's login, and it's subject to vulnerabilities, denial service. You have different
Yeah.
attacks, and at one point, and I always equate that this is like the Axie problem, and I know the community on Discord, there was a chat on it and things like that, but it comes down to money. So if there's not enough money and SPS is worth whatever 50 million or less or whatever, okay, it's not that motivating to a hacker. But at maybe a couple 100 million, yeah, maybe a billion, when there's enough money on there, there should, this is like me running an infosec, cybersecurity, the
Hmm.
defense company, right? You always say at one point it should be 1% of revenue. What is cybersecurity worth to the
Yeah.
company? What are you protecting? Are you protecting certain things that are intellectual property, physical assets? What digital footprint do you have to worry about, and what's the basically all the layers that need to be able to protect these.
So Noda or Nodes, who
Yes, he's the director of security.
yeah, I mean he watches the channel, so
Yeah, and
I would actually love to get his thoughts on it,
yeah,
because he and I had a great conversation at Splinterfest. So that might be fun to see where his head is at, because I mean, again, it was just, what's the thing that he's talking about is that ultimately, things are gonna happen, right? And it's just a matter of like figuring out or plugging the holes as soon as they do, type of, or at least that's the way that he was viewing security in that sense.
yeah, and it's also related to how much money Splinterlands has as a company, and the SPS and the various. So the more money, the more assets you have, the higher your target.
Yeah, yeah. Well, right now, I don't think that we have much of a target on our back at this point. I mean, it's
Some
too small.
there would be some in like you're not gonna, in terms of like bad actors. Yeah, you're not gonna get government or state attack on this amount of money. I doubt
Yeah,
that. Yeah, from that standpoint, but you're going to get small individuals around the world that have some curiosity and interest in
true, true.
yeah, just
Uh,
kind of kicking the curb a little bit.
you mentioned SPS evaluation. I want to pivot to that in a second, but let's just catch up on some of the chat, because I know that's the second piece of what we wanted to get into. Let's just see here. So Harris says, I have a feeling DEC will dump after Lux. I honestly don't think it has anything to do with Lux. Matt was very clear that they were buying it with the Rooney proceeds. So until and unless they get some other kind of cash infusion
But
from a
what would
sale or
cause
whatever.
DEC to dump
Uh,
their Lux? Because it goes to the corporate reserve.
well, people would be taking profits. The ones who bought in at half peg or 60% of peg may choose to take profits if they're holding now. Again, I don't. What'll be nice is that I think they're going to implement the swapping out of the LP soon. So that should create not a sink, but at least less sell pressure. Because, for example, I would get DEC from the LPs, right?
Oh
And then
yeah,
in order to compound my gains, my reward was paid in
you have
DEC.
it.
So I have to sell it. I
Yeah,
have to sell it every single day or whenever I compound, or every week, in order to do it. So that creates like additional sell pressure,
yeah.
which should be gone now.
This is the disadvantage of not having the DAO provide the liquidity piece of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
A
So
normal treasury, a
yeah,
normal,
yeah.
a normal, Web2 treasurer, would be managing the liquidity
Managing the
piece. And
liquidity themselves.
decentralized is great and everything, but it puts so much pressure on the individual and as a
Yeah.
community. And when you put a large financial burden on individuals and as an aggregate community, we tend to make poor decisions
Well, I feel
or
like
adverse decisions.
this isn't a bad idea. It's just people are earning revenue, right? Or like they view that as passive income, and if you take that away from them and give it to the DAO, I'm
They'll
not
buy
necessarily.
cards.
Yeah.
They'll play
So
the game.
they'll play the game. They'll do other
They'll
things.
create
So
bots.
is that something that we should be pushing for then?
Yeah, I mean that's
For the
that's
DAO to
organic
provide all the
growth.
liquidity?
That's organic growth, right? You have certain areas where investments in money you'll seek. The beauty of money is money will always seek a return, whether we take option risk, whether we take low risk, whether no one really. No one really likes to put money straight in a bank. Otherwise, you have the Japanese economy, right? Everyone just
Yeah.
sticks their money in the bank, and you have negative return. When everyone puts their money in one single source, then it's just there. It's not getting a return, and no one can grow, especially when you're going against inflation. You have an annual inflation. Think of how many things can beat inflation. And when we look at inflation, we can look at the CPI numbers, right? We can benchmark it against CPI, but realistically, every every individual around the world, depending on their government, and you, you look at inflation slightly different than what CPI. You have a different experience, right?
Yeah.
So some people like to save gas, and they may go to Costco, so that's a cheaper inflation number. They're dealing with
Yeah.
slightly on gas, right? And then some people like to go to Whole Foods. Well, inflation is going to be higher, slightly higher there when
Yeah.
you're going to compare to maybe potentially Walmart or Target, right? So we all have different
Yeah. Well,
experiential factor.
CPI already is just a cherry picked basket, right? So
Yes,
inflation is really different for every individual. Like, however you spend your money, you should be making your own basket to see
correct.
how much
Yes,
did the goods of your basket go up,
yes.
rather than like, this kind of. But okay, well, we're getting into that. All right, let's see. Let's see if there's any other comments here. A lot of you guys are talking about GLX, selling GLX for 58 cents, sold them for 65. Hey, I just want to say I was the first GLX
You sold
transaction. I
it for a
sold it for
buck.
$1. Let's see if any of you can beat me. All right. So yes, Amazon and Walmart single-handedly destroying family businesses for decades now. But that, you know what? That's just what happens, right? Sorry, I don't mean to say that so callously, but ultimately everything centralizes like that. All right, so the node whales say selling nodes for DEC undermines SPS. I tend to agree, and selling river project for DEC caps the upside for the DAO. SPS can 2, 3, 4x in price. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is a great point, right? And it's a good thesis. The question is who's running the DAO on behalf of the community. So so Matt and Pluck will have to make these arbitrage plays, or we have to delegate them as an official core to be able to manage the treasury and be able to make these types of transactions.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's a good question
And then
here.
they have bad things too. Is sometimes the play that's best for the DAO may not be good for the company.
It'll be interesting to see how that's navigated.
Yeah, so the concept of independence will have to
Mhm.
be in play, and this is why long term, you have Splinterlands, the company, and
Yeah,
its asset that continues to grow, and the company itself needs more DEC than the DAO itself to
sure.
transact.
Yeah,
And then also the company has other assets, and it redeploys them differently and may take different strategic approach. So eventually, I think as a DAO, and I think the community should be louder in terms of how they manage the DAO, because essentially the DAO makes there's no internal rate of return, right? There's no ROI, there's no transactional value. It's just like a graveyard of tokens. They just go there and die.
yeah. I don't
And
I
this
don't
is why
disagree with you on that.
SPS
Yeah,
is at its current value.
that I feel like clarity is still going to be needed between the two, though, and I don't like the lines are still so blurred right now.
Sure. I think part of it is we don't understand Splinterlands, the company, how the DAO is related to them. So
Yeah,
some basic things like domiciled, right? Corporate entity filing structure. So the question is, is the DAO considered from a tax structure a subsidiary? Do they have their own separate tax return, tax ID? How is the DAO recognized from a corporate entity perspective?
yeah, true.
And then what is the consideration here? We have the Splinterlands company on behalf of the DAO. Do they have a fiduciary responsibility?
That's a good point. Well, again, so we're talking about this Saturday. This whole FTX drama started Monday, Tuesday. So my hope is that we can bring some thoughtful questions to the next town hall, and I hope that they address. Obviously, Aggie usually talks about what's happening in the markets, but on a broader level. But I think considering the movement now with a lot of crypto to show these proof of reserves, I hope they can address it in a thoughtful way.
Yeah, I hope that the community will have these dialogues with leadership.
Yeah, true. All right, so Alex is saying Absalom's too emotional about the game for it to be an investment. That was me a while ago. I've separated it out, though. I take my ice cream money and I take a good chunk of my ice cream money, and I don't put that back into the game.
Yeah,
So,
I think if you're playing the game itself, it's kind of hard, and this is a true testament to migrating towards that piece of it. I think there was a question that was asked, am I pro central bank?
Yeah. Can you answer that for 1 second? I got to blow my nose real quick, so I'm gonna do that
Oh, okay,
off
okay.
screen. So if you want to answer that, I figure I know your answer already, but if you want to answer, Liberty Guy, give me 1 second.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a role for the central banks, definitely, and I think central banks will always be there, some form, shape. I think crypto will play a part of it. Definitely, it'll be a currency that will be evolving and integrated into some kind of monetary policy and the central bank piece. In terms of central bank and the SWIFT and our modern the IMF and all these, I think they'll continue to fight for it. So I think it's just a matter of like how much friction you want to have and what's the debate, and do we want to push for it, and then what percentage of the world's money, the world's asset, will be decentralized in a way that will move towards. And I think banks, the central banks themselves as a whole community, they'll recognize the value and the contribution and the benefit that blockchain, crypto, and the ability to provide from just the ease and movement. I think the cost, the friction is just too high in crypto for them to kind of have a large concern. But they are concerned. I mean, even J.P. Morgan, you have Jamie Dimon, you have a lot of they kind of talk around it, talk in circles, but in reality, they're when you look at their job board and you look at the people, they're hiring people to kind of address some of these. They're definitely great looking at their moat and saying, okay, is crypto really penetrating our moat? Are we vulnerable in certain areas? And they're doing their risk management, their due diligence piece. It's like Ray Dalio saying, yeah, maybe Bridgewater Associates itself does not own crypto, but I own some crypto on a personal level. So you have that experience where you have people like, even you look at Apple as a company, maybe Tim Cook owns some crypto, but maybe Apple doesn't. And it's that conversation, but eventually you start at the leadership level, you start at the board of directors, and you start at the various banks and its leadership, and then that rolls to the central bank and the IMF and the various SWIFT money system, and then eventually it'll just roll. It's just a question of to what extent are they going to integrate it into the ecosystem.
I agree. Some of the conversations you and I have had offline, you're very much interested in the role of DAOs moving forward. And in our last chat, you kind of labeled Splinterlands as 2.5 and not a real Web 3.0. So I'm sure we'll explore that a little bit further in the future.
Yeah, and I hope what Splinterlands is doing is setting the top end of what crypto DeFi gaming can be. At the same time, there's so much more work to be able to add to what they've accomplished, and the next small gaming company may do that. So someone like Splinterland, someone like a Matt, Aggie, and Dennis may take on this endeavor and may push that evolutionary curve to get us beyond 2.5.
That would be exciting, and I know you'd be excited to see it when it does happen.
Yeah, it's not going to come. It may come from So when you look at Microsoft as a company and their Xbox division, their gaming division, they throw stuff. They'll invest in Korean companies. They invest. They're investors. They'll throw into the crypto. They'll invest in different types, or even their Minecraft. Their game. They'll just kind of experiment with it, but they're not going to throw it all, because when you have that kind of wealth and that capital under management, you have time. You don't have to rush into it and make things, because at the end of the day, what's the largest amount of money that a company like Microsoft can throw into crypto, right? If they throw, like $50 billion, it'll completely change the directory of crypto. It doesn't allow really brilliant people to kind of incubate ideas and to come up with great concepts. And Microsoft can always just sit there and just say, okay, we'll just wait for something to come up. If we really, really like it, we'll buy it. We'll take a shot at buying it, or we'll make investment. Or if they don't like it, hey, it's like the Google, their GPS map. Like Apple, took a shot at it, and they're like, oh, we'll just try to do our own. Yeah, it won't be as good as it'll take maybe 30 years for Apple Maps to catch up to Google Maps, things like that. But we'll be there. We got money. It's that kind of competitive landscape we're looking at.
Gotcha. All right, so Virus is asking, they think they can cut vouchers from nodes or cut both staking and I don't know what they're going to do, but people are going to be unhappy either way, I think.
Yeah, I don't think they should cut vouchers completely from nodes. I think it's just cutting it for both nodes and SPS, the
Yeah.
drop rate.
But that doesn't solve what's currently out there, which is the battle that they're fighting with DEC right now. So
Correct. That's a separate. I think
Yeah.
nodes and DEC can be somewhat separated.
True,
I
true.
think I think DEC is on the company. They just have to everything they sell that's in non crypto or
Mhm.
non DEC in game product. They're just gonna have to throw at buying DEC.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
that's on them and their balance sheet. What did the virus say?
Well, sorry, that was going to change topics. He's saying that Baron was talking about hosting nodes as well with Luthien's husband. I think for them, though, if I understand correctly, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but for them, they were talking about just hosting one that wasn't license related, right? The way that Chance was, or you said that Chance was going to offer some kind of service for free, essentially.
Yeah, the
Okay.
hosting, the node, the validator node. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Walking Keys in the house. What's going on? Hello. All right, so let me just see if there's anything else here. A lot of folks talking to each other. All right, Keys, check your Discord messages. All right, let's see. Got my DEC ready for Lux. Took a loss on
He's
LPs. What's
just too
going on,
busy
Huey?
buying Roonies.
Yeah, I know. Walking Keys loves the Rooney, man. So everyone running to get node licenses gets rewards, but you can get earn rewards being top sec node without a license. Yeah,
there's,
you just.
there's still currently less than 70 Roonies. That's under 0.38. So it's.
I would love to see someone just come in and like wipe the floor of Rooney once it's out of minting. That'd be really interesting to see what happens. Costco low-key gas is awesome. Yes, it is. Huge bid on GLX's move. All right, aren't most DAOs set up as foundations? I don't know how to answer that.
It started kind of, I guess, part of the Bitcoin transition, and started as foundations, and then the Wyoming DAO has their DAO LLC project has enabled the directory to be filed as a C corporation LLC. Check the box type entity structure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But foundation makes sense, right, as the earliest startup for many things, because it can be where it's nonprofit and can be structured. But DAOs can be for-profit entities.
Yeah. All right, I see Flo saying, how about a new proposal, cap roof archer packs sold in DC to 500 packs? I mean, that's interesting because then you limit the amount of potential upside there. What I don't understand, what's that?
It creates complexity.
Yeah. Oh, what I don't understand is then buying it for ETH, BTC, BUSD, and BNB, because all you're doing is then helping those tokens and not SPS. Which, let's go ahead, because we caught up mostly to the thing. I wanted to get into the spicier topic, I feel like, of SPS value. And maybe I'm wrong for calling it spicy, but at least in our pre conversation before hitting the live button, if I can preface this with what you had said, where a lot of the sentiment from the team is, oh, we have to let markets market and blah blah blah, all that. Whereas you're saying that SPS doesn't have the value driven to it. So where are you viewing SPS value versus price versus utility right now?
Yeah, I think maybe one day we'll just have to kind of break, kind of enumerate how you would assign a value to SPS, right? So getting back to the previous comment on trading or exchanging either DEC or SPS for other tokens and kind of supporting the other token, I think that's correct. I think as a treasury, as a DAO treasury, we need to ensure the longevity of not only the DAO itself, but the game. But we don't have any control over the game because that's not part of the thesis and the white paper. We only have control over what's inside the SPS DAO itself. And I think from a longevity, diversification portfolio perspective, we should consider stable coins like USDC. We should look at Binance, Ethereum, Bitcoin. We just look at the diversity and assign percentages to them and just allocate them as percentage of the portfolio. In terms of the actual value, and this gets to the value, is that when you have market volatility and fluctuations in certain coins and tokens, you have diversity. So in aggregate, you can kind of have a balance, so to speak. It's just like, what to what percentage we want to create this balance. It's like your own personal portfolio. What do you do with your finances, and how do you protect your family's wealth? How do you do transgenerational wealth to preserve it? And the DAO should be managed the same way. So in terms of the SPS valuation piece, we look at currently. I think it only has a certain number of tokens inside the treasury, and that token that is a minimum value. The current whatever's inside the DAO is a minimum value that anyone, when you parse it by, I think 900 and something million currently.
900. I think there's about between 60 to 70 million SPS tokens that are currently in there.
Yeah. So when you look at that, then is it undervalued based on that? So then, if people understand, and we as a community articulate the valuation and what we project as the true value of the SPS, then we can encourage others to support that and to buy and hold and stake in terms of that piece. And then it's the other component is like, the ability to arbitrage, right? To burn SPS into DEC. Like, what's the frequency when it gets there? And I think people will start to see that DEC will be burned pretty quickly by people, especially if you can get 10+% return on the arbitrage, and basically you get it in seconds.
What do you mean? You mean SPS will be burned?
Yeah, for DEC.
Oh, you said DEC is going to be burned. Okay.
No, I meant no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. In terms of burning the SPS when DEC.
Gotcha. Okay.
Valuation. So you have a supply because the number of people who are staking, and then I think also, like, in terms of the gameplay itself, we haven't really gotten to the point where we're staking on players, and we haven't gotten to the point where there's actual value for staking SPS. So we just need to kind of list out the total value, and we need to add to it as the game and the roadmap comes forth, and to come up with what is the actual value. And then you'll have things that players and the community investors, they'll project depending on market conditions, they'll just assign. And it's just like any other token or anything. We just forecast it and say in 6 months we think it'll be worth this, and then so if we think it's going to be worth 4 cents now, and in 6 months we think it'll be worth like 6 cents or 8 cents or whatever, or 10 cents, then we can make this financial better, more informed, educated financial decisions to buy these types. And we're not. I don't think we should provide a financial advice perspective, but we should be able to enumerate what the actual value of the DAO is, the net worth of the DAO.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so that was a lot more in depth than I was expecting, because when I gave a little pushback again in our previous conversation of, it's not a dilution issue, like we're still getting diluted a bunch. Are you saying has no impact, or that's just minimal impact? I
mean, it does have an impact, but that'll be factored into this is part of the market piece, right? We know it's going to be diluted, and what do we expect 6 months from now from the dilution?
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you create what is the net worth of the DAO, the current net worth of the DAO, and then you add the dilution, and that's part of the 6 month. And then you add other market conditions, inflations, and things like that, and other areas, and you may arrive. So this is like human beings. We, as investors, as individuals, we arrived at different value. So we know what the actual net asset is on the balance sheet of the DAO, and then from there, this is where the market dynamic, the market component. Everyone has different opinions. It's like going to bet, right? It's like playing baccarat. We know there's a certain number of cards it'll flip a certain, and maximum it'll add up is 9, right? It's just a matter of, okay, you bet bank or a player, right? So it's kind of like that. It's just making projections, and there's an RNG process, and this is why you gamble and you make money if you're in the right. And this is why sometimes it's time in the market is more valuable than trying to time the market, right?
Sure,
So
sure, yeah.
you look at fundament. So then you become more of a fundamental investor versus if you're arbitraging, you're hedging, and so there's different types of people in the community, people who have stake. So in essence, you want to favor people who are fundamental investors and who believe in the token, who want to stake long term,
Sure,
and
sure,
then
yeah.
you want to create this value to support their belief and their faith in the DAO itself.
Interesting. Okay.
And there's nothing long term for the DAO to restrict the DAO to invest in other games outside of Splinterlands too.
Okay, interesting you mentioned that, because I was just gonna say, like, what happens if there ends up being like a cross-pollination across like all of the stuff that Splinterlands is involved with in the future, right? So obviously GLX is the first part of that, but they've talked about partnerships with Warner Music and who knows who else they might be in conversations
Yep.
with. Like, is that like part of the strategy then for the
Sure,
DAO,
I think,
or is that putting too many eggs in one basket?
no, I think it's good to have like a healthy. I mean, maybe 1% of Splinterland's assets should go into GLX.
Oh, you're talking about
The
interesting. So
SPS
have the DAO buy.
Yeah, I think 1% of the DAO treasury should be GLX. That should be a conversation.
Oh, that'd be great. I mean, if they do that, what's 1%? That they'd spend about $30,000 on
Yeah,
on GLX right now. Pump that
but it's
price, and I
staking,
can
right?
sell.
But so DAO is staking, you're earning.
Yeah,
It's good return.
actually, that's a good point. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a very simple question then, because I'm curious now, since you gave your broad outlook. What are the steps that we need to take in order to get SPS from 4 cents, where it is now, back up to $1?
I think just put more money in the DAO, have the DAO earn, to create more products and services to generate the funds. I think it's just that is one component, and to what end or what degree that means, and to what purpose is the DAO, and that's a long-term conversation of crafting it, right? We have the general white paper of what the DAO is. Do we want to change that? Is that something the community has an appetite for? Maybe as an aggregate community, the large investors, they invest in SPS and they say, look, I just want to believe in SPS as is, and I just want to keep it as is, and that may be the case. And the beauty of the DAO is we vote on it. It's just what one single player wants, it may not necessarily be with the direction of the community.
Speaking of voting, I'm just curious, because I know once again you're big on decentralization, and I want to get, if you could grade where, and again, obviously they're not fully there yet in decentralization, and you say that they're really capped out at doing Web 2.5, but if you could grade Splinterlands from a DAO and governance perspective so far, like what would you grade them, and then what are the areas in which you think that they could improve in like the short to medium term?
I think there's no other DeFi gaming product that has advanced the DAO as much as Splinterlands. So from that standpoint, they're an A, right? They're an
Okay.
by itself.
We're grading on a curve here, I see.
Yes, it's always that, right? It's always like, what's the next best idea? It's like I always look at investment, right? Is there anything else better? I mean, if you apply something like this in your personal life, it's a terrible application. But in terms of investment, right? Investment choices, you're always looking at what is better out there. Can I replace this thing? So currently there isn't anything out there.
Okay.
And I'm not looking at it from a gaming perspective. This is purely investment and purely DAO talk. And
but you do play the game.
Yes, I mean, I like strategy games. I play a lot of strategy games. I play a lot of Web 2 strategy games too, because part of gaming is it's supposed to kind of be a stress reliever, right? There's a component of gaming, and so there's always going to be that piece. And tower defense is hopefully like that, so the payout's not going to be as good, but but it provides a certain means entertainment value to our quality of life.
I don't know about stress reliever, because every time Blight doesn't stick poison and affliction, that stresses me out, and then I come on here to complain about it.
So Splinterlands is not a stress reliever game. I don't view Splinterlands in that category. It's
Okay,
very
what category
competitive.
would you put it in then?
It's a DeFi game. It's very competitive.
Mhm.
DeFi has to come first. It has to make money. People, you know, Spencerlands is very expensive when you look at
Sure.
Magic, and you look at Pokemon cards, and you know I don't even know how many packs of Pokemon cards I have or bought, and things like that. But it's like a new one just came out right this month, so you have that piece of it. But when you're playing, it's that you don't experience the same level of stress, or
Sure, sure, yeah.
same level of you don't gravitate towards thinking how much did I earn if I make this play, if I buy this card, would it make a percentage difference, and then how much more would I earn, and was that worth it? It gets into larger
Sure.
pieces, and so those cards are not as expensive as Splinterlands. And Splinterlands, as a company, they kind of design, so like when you the original appetite and their original thoughts on any of these cards, whether it's their promo like Dr. Blythe, or Waka, or the current Lux Vega, right? You have certain use cases they attribute to
Mhm.
it, and they think that and they're looking at it as like, okay, what's the floor I can charge, and then how can I incentivize people to buy it? It's like the Rooney. The Rooney is not like a fun thing to have. It's an investment.
Sure,
However
sure,
you
yeah.
look at it, it's completely. It's like, how much use case or do we anticipate the company to? Are they going to be more traditional PFP collectible use case? Are they going to do something different because they're Splinterlands, right? Well, one of the things Weirdbeard talks about, he's even his kind of his tournament, his draw in, and you buy these packs and things like that. He's gonna Splinterlandize it, right? It's not going to be completely
Mhm.
what you would experience in a Magic format. So everything has to be significantly more expensive in the Splinterlands community, because you have time. You have the time asset attribute to it. So and that's what, like, I think we worry so much about the new players and the new player experience coming in. The reality is, like, we don't even know as current players what our experience is, what we want it to be. We don't
Mhm.
even know the type of player. Like, do we want to be completely like built? Because as the game grows, and the game is still so new, so like some of the changes and things like that, we don't know. Like, land is so complicated, right? I play a few games, whether it's Web 2 or Web 3, that has some land element to it, and they value, and that I get a daily payout from the Web 3 land component
Mhm.
of it, and you collect it, you restake it, or you just take it out of the game, however you want, and they however they want to parse it in their roadmap. I think that they've shown a little bit of the roadmap, but there's still like many elements that they haven't really filled in the blanks for.
Yeah.
You have the actual land, and you have the common areas, and then you have the assets, the spells, the type of the wood and stones, or whatever it is that they're going to do. But then it's like there's a whole economy aspect of it, the non-card market,
Yeah.
that's going to be overlaid into this, and then the effects, like so one of the instances, steerage, right? Do you want to steer players who spend more time in this land metaverse? But then what happens when you steer them away? Well, we would just be left with bots playing the actual rank rewards side
Yeah.
of the system, because someone like Gank, who owns an entire region, I mean, that's his life, 10 hours a day, right, on
Yeah.
land
Well,
management.
hopefully they'll find ways to automate a lot of that. I think Peak Monsters is committed to doing that. But I'm glad you brought that up, because my thing with land, and I'm not trying to like, I'm just trying to be realistic here. I'm not trying to like tear anything down. I own 2 plots of land. Obviously, I wish I owned more, but the sentiment around land seems to be too much of it being like a savior for the game, right? Like, it's going to do X, Y, and Z. It's going to help defeat bots because there'll be an additional phase of battle. It's going to help, or curb bots, I should say. It's going to bring new players in. It's going to do yada yada yada. And I just feel like the weight of those expectations on land are way too high. And whatever the MVP, minimum viable product, that ends up dropping between now and sometime next year for playable land is going to absolutely crush 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 the spirit of the community. And to your point about someone like Gank, right? Like, right now, would you consider, sorry, this is a rhetorical question, it's like, would people consider Gank a whale in the game? I don't know
Probably
what his
not. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
Ultimate
wouldn't.
Answer would probably be closer to the whale with the 3 regions.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is like right now, and again, this is nothing against Gank. This could be any like region or tract holder. The point that I'm trying to make is that like at that point in time, the game will create new whales around more in-game assets and resources, right? Because whoever owns a region or multiple regions will now be able to dictate the price of those and benefit themselves. And again, I'm not anti-whale. I'm not anti landholders, whatever the case is. I'm just saying it's going to fundamentally shift the economy. So the argument that like, oh, it's going to bring in new players, it's going to improve the player experience, it's going to be figured out for a while, and it's going to be dominated by the people who own the most land.
It'll bring in new bots, if that's what you mean. I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah.
I think people forget that we're in crypto, right?
Mm-hmm.
We deal with machines. We deal in
True, yeah.
blockchains. We deal in immutable transactions, right? These are all things that are ripe for bots. When you don't embrace bots, it's never get like humanity. We will eventually reproduce less and less over time.
Mm-hmm.
There will be fewer and fewer of us, and all we have to actually extract economic value will be the bots and our intellectual capital.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the. I think that's part of the. I don't want to call it an issue, but there's definitely conversations about where's the future of the game headed if everything is going to be bottable, right? Like,
I mean, not everything will be bottable. I think high stakes tournaments will not be bottable, just because
I
sponsors will
agree.
not allow it.
Well, I 100% agree. My issue is that it doesn't seem like the team's focusing heavily on that. So at least not yet.
No, it's because they have to deal with the RNG conversation with with a sponsor. You know, if I'm a sponsor, yeah, I'll pay Splinterlands one time, and also like the historical piece. Like when you look at the tournaments, and you know, we can talk about this another time. And I'm not a believer in like for me as a personal level to be a tournament player because I'm not that good. So I would be wasting my money and contributing to the pot, and I don't know. It's just not a good habit long term for me to do that. I think you have to have a certain win rate to be able to contribute to the pot, because you have to gain something out of it in terms of net. Your expected value has to be positive. I think. So I think. We don't even know the history of the winners, like how all the money had been, whatever, $6 million or the giveaways, right? We can't even parse that piece in the conversation. And then if we were to say, okay, how do we create heroes out of these? How do we we immortalize these people, right, or memorialize them to at the minimum? Like, who are these guys?
I mean, that's part of the issue right now is that they're just usernames, or they're just,
so Splinterlands as a company has to wipe it out and start from clean.
It'd be great. It'd be great if they could. I don't think that they will, which is why
they're not looking at the business aspect, and they're not looking at it from a sponsor and the growth and what tournaments. And I thought, you know, going to the HyperX arena, I thought one of the executives, they would have these kinds of high level conversation, what it takes to. And, you know, my opinion doesn't matter because, again, you know, I'm a negative EV player in tournaments, so I'm not a good player. But, you know, that doesn't mean I'm not willing to stake my SPS on a good player. That doesn't mean I'm not willing to stake on a large amount, you know, on a player that I think could potentially win, because at the end of the day, I just don't know the algorithm behind it. I don't have faith in the algorithm.
Are you talking about the RNG?
Yeah.
Because it's not audited yet, or auditable.
Right, correct. Yep. Yeah, I mean, if I'm okay with rank battle and losing and things like that, it's just diminutive how it affects me.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, when I put $1,000 worth of SPS on someone and I stake it, it's a big difference.
True. Or a sponsor coming in with tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So, and then, you know, I think high level guild will never be botted when it's done correctly.
Well, it's happening now, though.
Yeah, but it's because of the way it's being done.
But I don't see. Here's the problem. I don't know how you stop that. So, at the risk of sounding the alarm, which I don't want to do, but I'm just being honest with where my thoughts are at right now. You know, I was very big on Yeah, I've left ranked play behind. I don't think there's any way to save ranked rewards. It's going to be what it is. It's going to be botted to hell.
Yeah,
But
it's
I
an
was always looking
entry.
forward to
It's a good entry.
yeah, yeah, and that's fine.
You
But I
know,
was looking forward to like brawls or sorry, guilds specifically and guild brawls as like this team element, and then tournaments being more like single competition. But the fact that bots have now become pervasive in brawls, it
low
makes me
level, medium level, moderate level
yeah.
should have bots.
Well, but here's the thing, right? Like at some point, the way that I'm looking at it, right? Because you think about bots in tournaments and brawls. Right now, with the way that Splinterfest was done, for example, you can create a parallel tournament structure that's required in person, and you can vet you can vet everything about the player and about the advantages that the player has, right? So whether it's a bot or whether it's whatever, make sure that they don't all the way up until the auditability of the RNG.
You can do remotely. You can create VPN. You can isolate it. You can tunnel it, and things will just be an exact audible shot where the player has to make the play.
Sure, sure. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is you can create a parallel tournament structure that accounts for all of the unknowns except for the auditability, right? Which is what you and I are stuck on right now. But you can't really do that with guilds unless, once again, you create this parallel structure outside of guilds. But then everybody's putting their capital into guilds, and unless it becomes something where there's an outside.
All right, so let me introduce you to a different concept, right?
Okay.
So what happens if you do tournament-based guild?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But again, this would need to be created outside the current
Sure,
Splinterlands framework,
yes,
just like the way that I'm talking about tournaments.
Yes, guild is the highest enumeration of tournaments that an entire game can actually achieve. It's not this individual structure, that you see right now. That the highest level, like tournaments, will have to be at the guild level. It can't be at the single individual level because it's great to have that single star. It's like it's like sports team, right? You're eventually going to have teams. You're not going to have this dominant. Like you can argue like boxing, right? You can have a single main event fight can produce, but it's actually an entire program that goes into it that builds that leads up to the main event, right? And but we're not designed that way in terms of where we are, but in terms of creating the highest generated revenue for both Sprinterlands and the community, it's really tournament guilds. It's creating these teams that will be able to, and this is where
no, you're right.
Rooney offers. It's like currently when we go to the different types, we can actually block certain cards and things like that. So if you have a certain number of Roonies, you can provide certain functions and features and attributes to give to this when you're staking these Roonies. And depending on the level, the BCX of these Roonies that you're burning and things like that, it can do different things. So if you have one BCX Rooney stake, you have two BCX Rooney, you have three BCX, 4, 5, BCX staked on a guild. You can actually even to the point where you take out their star player.
Oh, through something like Rooney staking. Yeah.
And is that fair or unfair? At the highest level, everyone should be able to have a maxed out staked Rooney at the highest tier 5 guild, right? When you're playing in a tier 5 tournament. So essentially, you can take each other's star players out. So it's a fair transaction.
Okay, my mind is racing now with a bunch of different ideas. You got me thinking about a couple different things here.
Yeah, the highest economic value that Splinterlands can attribute to its player base, its community, the company. It's not in tournaments. What Weirdbeard is thinking, it's the brawl tournaments that will aggregate the highest economic value.
But once again, I'm getting,
because you're only looking at a linear perspective.
Sure. I guess what I'm getting caught up on is the fact that like I don't think the Splinterlands team ever makes the decision, or the Splinterlands whales with the most SPS ever make the decision to change the current structure, right? So and again, that current structure is what has been botted, I guess, for lack of better words.
So why did you vote for? Why do you think whales vote to give SPS rewards to guilds outside of the white paper?
Well, they were voting on the structure on of how those rewards would be given out.
Correct. Right.
But
So
we always knew that was going to happen.
yep. So imagine the DAO and the sponsors coming up with a huge economic pool that's outside. This is new money that's coming out, coming into the game,
Mhm.
and they're actually creating that incentive.
Okay, so
So then the whales have no comment, right? They're either going to put up or shut up, right? They're either going to.
what do you mean? What do you mean they have no comment? They would still they still get to decide what happens with those funds once they enter the DAO, though.
No, because they're sponsors fund. You, the sponsor, decide. As a sponsor, you're not going to have some SPS whale tell you what to do with your money. You give it away to the winner. You design the structure of the brawl, the tournament.
Okay, well, okay, so this is what I'm
It's
this
new
is what
money.
I'm. But where does it go?
It goes to the winners. the
Where is it
guild.
held though?
It's held by the sponsors.
Until the
Yep.
winner. Okay.
Yep.
Well, again, that's great in a perfect world, but my point is that the way that the current tournaments and structures are designed, they're not going to change anything within that, right?
Right.
Everything that involves like a tournament sponsor will have to come from outside.
Yeah, because Weirdbeard is completely focused on the single tournament structure. He's not focused on the guild.
Well, but that's a good place to start, right?
Yeah.
Single tournament structure. The guild.
Maybe. But it's too complicated to overcome the RNG process and things like that.
All right, well, we're not going to solve the RNG audit to overnight, right? Like, I mean, that's something that we need to bring up to the team and have them actually figure out. Okay, my question for you, and just for so for folks who are just coming in or whatever, like, so you and I have been talking about this, and we don't have to go into much detail. We can save it for later or offline. But one of the things that you and I are interested in is figuring out how to build a true like Web3 DAO, for example, right? So part of and we've been talking about this in other areas, such as like whatever the case is.
You want to go to the chat and get their comments first before we have this, or
we jump in?
Yeah,
I do, but okay. I'm also running short on time.
Yeah,
I said I was gonna stream an hour. What's that?
Your call. Yeah.
Your call. Oh, my call. That's fine. I think they're still having breakfast. So I got some family in town. So I don't want to end the conversation just yet. All right. So no need to cut voucher rewards. Just create skins. All right. So let's catch up on the chat. Thank you for reminding me. I got so involved in it. I think people are happy with the Rooney. There should be a way to change them without burning another Rooney. I don't know, but they really messed that up. People are upset about it, and I don't blame them. I'm still happy about the fact that Roonies will be burned, though. The point would be to stock the DAO with a basket of coins, diversify the holdings. I think Foyet would agree with you on that. DAO should have a mix of SPS DEC. Is Hive lagging? I'm not sure. We need to get the MTG community here. Oh, one thing I wanted to ask a while back is how much is it for a starter pack for like the Magic the Gathering starter pack? I think when I bought my first one, it was like $10, which is a super easy and cheap entry into a game that Splinterlands obviously doesn't have.
Correct.
So nothing will stop bots. Bots play better than people. Yep, my bot is doing way better than me right now.
I think bot plays better than most people.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at here. What's up, Jim Morgan?
But at the end of the day, right? What are we trying to achieve? Essentially, the average person should just let bots play, and we learn from it. We study, we become better students, right? And then when we become better, we rise above that, and we're in the top 10% of the player community. Then we get paid more. But not everyone wants to rise to. It's hard work.
Well, okay, but here's the thing. So in response to that, yeah, everybody can let their bots play and watch the bots and learn and study. The problem then becomes, well, at the end of the day, if you rise to the top, but you're still playing the best bot out there,
they're not going to be better than you.
You don't think so?
No.
I mean, there's a prevailing thought right now. It's kind of like an open rumor at this point
because the players are
brawl and tournament winners are all botted that are going like 11-0 in these tournaments.
Because the player base isn't good enough, or the cards have not been randomized enough. We don't have enough card sets to be able to create a larger intellectual calculation. The larger complexity we have, it leads to different computational
I feel
strategies.
like there's one player that can keep up with bots, and that's Yasik, and he's always talking about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it should be that these players should be rewarded.
I don't disagree. And
There's
so
a
what
lot
I'm
of time commitment to be better than bots. There's a lot of study, a lot of
true.
practice, and a lot of analysis, and even little things like moving your card from a position 2 to a position 3, or it's a lot of like trial and error to get there. Not
Yeah.
easy.
I feel like, again, we're gonna get back to this conversation about creating some type of competition that allows for human only with no advantages, no cheat sheets or anything.
Yep.
Which
And
again, just
that's where we talked about having the the grassroots tournaments and having these inhuman play, and there will always be those types.
okay. So can we just Jim's so confused. Yeah, me too, Jim. But I'm trying my best to keep up with Foyet. Let's see. So am I a whale stock jockey? Probably. Whale status. Drone wars, just like the nature of combat. All right. So Jackie's in the house. What's going on, Jackie? Yeah, Foyet's a super smart guy. I'm learning a lot. Hope you guys are too. Preemptively strike the bots. Okay. Oh, look at that. We're all caught up with chat. So let me close out with this. And let me just say, I don't want to get into the whole what we were talking about previously for like myself or what we're planning to do. We'll keep that offline for now. But within that same framework, would it be possible to create a DAO-like structure for a set of like tournament series that could exist outside of Splinterlands, still uses Splinterlands platform and the game and people's accounts and all that, but go in a way that you could actually vet all the players, ensure that there's no, again, outside of the RNG issue, but create like a separate, almost like a separate token or currency, right, to fund whatever will be coming from this. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
and
is that
I'm
something?
surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised YouTubers didn't come together and collaborate and create a DAO that would represent this and grassroot it.
Well, maybe we can still do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the next evolutionary check mark, right?
Yeah.
For YouTubers, because you only make so much from the whole process.
I guess because again, and I for me, it's about building something in parallel to whatever they have, because I just don't think it's going to get changed. And the problem then becomes like, okay, where do you get the funding for something like this? But if you launch it
It's a community, it's a token coin.
Yeah,
And
so
it's the
if you
same
launch
thing
it
how,
as a
like,
separate project entirely, I think
Yep.
that there's a lot of value that could come from that. Again, you'd have to think through the tokenomic structure for what that would look like and give it value so that people aren't just winning the token from, whatever, and then selling out.
Oh yeah,
But
I don't think you. Yeah, I think you give the token and certain rewards, but that's tokens that's acquired by the DAO. So
yeah,
you always want the DAO to be positive. You don't want to spend more than you take in.
true,
But,
of course.
yeah, I think the beauty of Splinterlands and being the kind of the forefront leaders, you have things that come out of it, incubate like Peak Monster, right? You have these types of you have Splex, you have these types of programs, and there will always be creating these services within the community, and it'll just be tacked on. So Splinterlands has created this flywheel, and people can just augment to it, and people can make a living and generate. People can write blogs. There's a lot of services between Hive and Splinterlands that over time, and to what you're saying in terms of creating a separate DAO to represent the tournaments outside, these are things that are natural organic progression. I think that should happen or should be encouraged by the community as well as a whole.
Okay, well, we'll dig into this a little bit more, because the thought's intriguing now. Just because my interest is in building some kind of competitive structure that is much more. It sucks because it's in a way it's going to be much more centralized, but it'll have more tightly enforced rules. And as long as the rules are clearly established and labeled out, then you can get around the centralization aspect of it.
Yeah, you'll have fair play, and then those who do a little bit more research and work and trial and test the RNG and figure out some of the little flaws and things like that, gambits, and they'll be a little bit better.
Yeah. All right, hold on. I got Jackie. Thank you so much. This is so incredibly kind of you. Um, Jackie's gonna fund the DAO. That's amazing.
Yes.
Happy Saturday to you, Jackie. Yeah, she's starting the YouTube DAO. All right, well, I mean, that's gonna go straight to whatever kind of project we can build out here. But there's a lot to think about. Ice cream money, indeed. I'm gonna go have some ice cream today. So thank you, Jackie.
There you go.
Okay, so we'll continue this conversation offline, but I think it's an interesting thought of the problem is then you're building a DAO around a game that all of a sudden, if anything happens to that game, this DAO essentially collapses as well.
No, not necessarily, because you want to diversify. Again, the structure is for to have the DAO lasts in perpetuity, right? So you want to take. It's just like what you're doing with your ice cream money, and so the DAO will eventually take earnings, and they'll do the other things with their money to diversify, to ensure that because essentially the DAO needs to take things that are risk averse and safe. So passive income will be priority, and things that will kind of return, and they'll just look at things that are potentially returning under 10% annualized return, and you're just dealing with hopefully slightly better than inflation value.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, you're not trying to get an asymmetric return in terms of the DAO asset. Maybe at some point you grow to the point where it has enough that you can say, well, assign 0.5% in the asymmetric return bucket. It's like I would say like the wealth piece. How you would want to diversify your portfolio. You'll have just like in human real life, right? You want a certain amount for it's like Tony Robbins talks about in his wealth book, right? Wealth management. One of the ways is you have certain things for your daily living, so that could be 3 to 6 months, and then you have things that you take that you would want to grow in this conservative piece, and then you have things that you want to put it a little bit for long-term things like vacation or new games with the DAOs investing, or or to get the community together, to get people who are part of the core team, or so you have different buckets that you as a DAO, you vote as a community, and you vote to decide how you want to save for it and how you want to best manage it.
Gotcha. Okay. There's a lot to think about. I do have to hop off now. Kind of hard stop around this time, but Jackie, once again, thank you so much. We're gonna roll this forward, and we'll do a giveaway stream on the next stream that I'm able to do. Any closing thoughts for you, Foyet, where we're at? Recent announcement. I mean, there's a lot. We covered so much here, but any closing thoughts you want to leave the group with?
I'm good, and I appreciate the time. Yeah.
Oh no, I appreciate you coming on and talking here. I think again, this conversation has been so wide ranging, but when we were messaging this morning or last night, the proof of reserves thing, I think, is something that's very timely, and I hope that can be brought up in the next town hall, just because I think it would alleviate any kind of anxiety for folks and be a good practice for any kind of project in the space.
Yeah, and I hope the team takes some of these changes to heart, and they'll consider business continuity and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any final comments here? Love you all, even me. Everybody loves you, Stock Jockey. Good people. Alex hid me where it hurts, calling me up on my chick bump cheeks. I'm gonna go bury my feelings by eating some more ice cream, just in protest. Icy Flow, thanks for being here. All right, great live stream. Foyet is awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming to hang out. I will try to be live again on Tuesday. I got family still staying until then, but hopefully Tuesday we can get back to a normal-ish schedule. But otherwise, have an amazing rest of your week. We'll chat with y'all soon. All right, take care.